Over in Canada, trouble is mounting for Mr. Teflon. I'm talking about Justin Trudeau. He has a way of slipping out of trouble, but this time his people want answers. They're disappointed with his handling of Canada, specifically how China meddled in Canadian elections. Some background first. Canada had intelligence that China tried to interfere in their elections, not once but twice, in 2019 and then again in 2021. But this information was never made public. The government knew about it, but they refused to act. In 2022, the intelligence got out. Several Canadian media houses published it. They accused China of trying to favor the Liberal Party. That's Justin Trudeau's group. You can see what it looks like. China tried to meddle in favor of Trudeau's party. He knew about it, but he did not act. Imagine you're the opposition in Canada. Would you let it slide? So Trudeau was forced to set up a one-man committee. Last week, its report was submitted. Do you know what it said? No public inquiry necessary. The report claimed that Trudeau's government did not knowingly ignore intelligence, whatever that means. But Canadians are far from happy. Here's what an opinion poll found. 55% of Canadians say Trudeau's response was poor or very poor. 24% say it was average, and just 14% say it was good. Frankly, these numbers are not surprising. Elections are the beating heart of every democracy. No citizen can accept election interference, especially not from a rival state like Canada. And here, Justin Trudeau knew about it. He ignored intelligence on Chinese interference, knowingly or unknowingly. Doesn't really matter. It's not a luxury that politicians really have. But our story doesn't end here. This opinion poll was taken before Friday last week. And since then, a lot has happened. Trudeau's one-man committee resigned on Friday. The opposition said he was too close to the Prime Minister, so things are not looking good for Justin Trudeau. The question is, what happens next? The opinion polls may only focus on the election meddling claim, but the results show a bigger story, the growing mistrust of China. Around 55% of Canadians want to decrease trade with China. Only 18% have a positive opinion of Beijing. What does that tell you? The average Canadian does not like China. But do they like India? Around 41% Canadians have positive opinions of India. To give you some context, the US only scored 54% on the same poll. So 41 is not a bad number at all. But tell that to the government. Trudeau's government is intent on sabotaging relations, it seems. Again, knowingly or unknowingly. Look at all the incidents this month. First, Canada's National Security Advisor accused India of interference. She clubbed India with countries like Russia and Iran. Then you had this hateful tableau. It glorified the assassination of Indira Gandhi. But Canada says it's not a hate crime. So let me sum up Trudeau's politics for you. He gives China a free pass, all the evidence and public opinion be damned. But he also shelters Indian separatists. Such mindless politics will impact bilateral ties. In fact, Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar warned of it. He said such actions are not good for relations. But don't expect Justin Trudeau to act. He's consumed by vote bank politics. In his mind, seeking action against separatists is interference, but trying to rig elections is not. It's a logic only Mr. Teflon can explain. Perhaps his free pass to China will backfire electorally. Then you can be sure of a public inquiry. And speaking of problems that last for generations, let's talk about climate change. Parts of India and Pakistan are bracing for a major cyclone. The UK recently reported a heat wave. Supercharged typhoons, wildfires and droughts have become commonplace. We see the news, we know the risks, and we often wonder, what can we as individuals do about it? Well, 16 American children are showing the way. They're in the US state of Montana and they're making history. They filed a case against their government over the climate crisis. They've sued the state of Montana, and it's the first such case ever to go to trial in the US. Its outcome could have implications beyond America, though. It could empower more people across the world to hold their government accountable for climate change. Here's a report.
They say children are the future. But what future are we leaving behind for children? One riddled with extreme weather events, where constant greenhouse gas emissions lead to irreversible climate change? Well, some children have refused this future and are fighting to protect the environment. We're talking about a group of 16 children from the US state of Montana. They have sued the state government for its fossil fuel-friendly policies, and they're actually being heard in court. In 2020, this group of children filed the lawsuit. They were between 2 and 18 years old at the time. They cited Montana's state constitution. The constitution guarantees the right to a clean and healthful environment. Yes, that's written into Montana's constitution. And the children say that the state government is blatantly ignoring that clause. Montana has the largest coal reserves in the US, and it has promoted the coal mining industry over the years. An example is a law passed in May. It limits the effectiveness of environmental regulators. It stops them from assessing the climate impacts of proposed fossil fuel projects, like coal mines or power plants. Obviously, this makes it easier for companies to flout environmental rules. The 16 children from Montana are fighting to highlight this, because the lawsuit itself does not really have a solution. Even if the children win the case, the court will only be able to issue a declaratory judgment, meaning it can say that the state's constitution was violated, but the court cannot formulate new laws. That remains in the hands of politicians. So this lawsuit will not be able to stop Montana's poor climate practices. And yet, the government is fighting back hard, using every tactic possible. First, there was slander. The state called the lawsuit a mere publicity stunt, a waste of taxpayer money, aimed at shutting down responsible energy development. Then Montana tried to get the case dismissed, first completely, then partially. But it didn't work. Then they took it to Montana's Supreme Court last week. This was a bid to delay the trial, but none of it helped. The trial has begun. It'll last 2 weeks. The judge will then produce the verdict. Experts say that Montana is unlikely to accept criticism, that it will make an appeal to a higher court, even if it's only a declaratory judgment. After all, fossil fuel companies won't want a negative outcome in such a high-profile case. It may pave the way for more such lawsuits across the US and the world, which is what the children ultimately want. Even if the Montana court can't undo the damage caused by their government, it can serve as a precedent, a rallying cry for environmentalists everywhere, one they can use in the next fight against the fossil fuel industry.
For our next story, we're taking you to the Netherlands. It's a small country in Europe, home to around 17 million people, and they're all under threat. Not by an imposing neighbor or a brutal terrorist organization, but by the sun's rays. And the government has come out with a plan to protect them. Free sunscreen. It may sound frivolous, but it's a serious situation. The cases of skin cancer are on the rise in this country, and sunscreen is their first line of defense. So this is what the government plans to do. Install sun cream dispensers across the country, in schools, in universities, in parks, at festivals and other public spaces. These will be a lot like sanitizer dispensers that you saw almost everywhere during the pandemic and since then. For the Netherlands, this is a major health initiative. The country faces record levels of skin cancer. We are talking about 1 in 6 Dutch people developing skin cancer, 1 in 6 people. The reason is UV rays or ultraviolet rays. Overexposure to such rays, mostly from the sun, leads to skin cancer. But the sun is not the only source. There are artificial sources too, like sun lamps or tanning beds. Their rays damage skin cells. They trigger the formation of abnormal cells. And these are cancerous cells. They divide rapidly. They spread rapidly. And in some cases, they can be deadly. Skin cancer can be deadly in some cases. So the Dutch government's move is a step in the right direction. Hopefully, it will also change mindsets. You see, across the world, sunscreen is treated like a cosmetic product. It carries a heavy tax. It's often also seen as a luxury product. But increasingly, it is proving to be essential. The Dutch move may set a precedent for others to follow, because skin cancer is on the rise across Europe. More than 7 million Europeans are estimated to have it. Look at the case of Germany. Germany is a neighbor of the Netherlands. It has seen a 55% increase in deaths from skin cancer, 55% increase in the past 2 decades. Also, skin cancer, you would know, is of several types. The most serious type is called melanoma. And melanoma has claimed about 60,000 European lives in 2020. But of course, skin cancer is not limited to Europe, and it's a myth that only white people are at risk. People of all ethnicities and colors can be affected. The highest rates of melanoma, in fact, are observed in Australia and New Zealand. This is followed by Western Europe, Northern America, Northern Europe, and then Africa and Asia. So far, so depressing. But here's something encouraging too. Most cases of skin cancer are preventable. All you need is sun protection. And most experts agree that all of us need it all year round. But we need it especially during late spring and early summer. That's when harmful UV rays are the strongest. So perhaps it's time you spoke to your doctor and picked what's best for you. Our next story is from Thailand. It's a Buddhist kingdom, but its southern region has a Muslim majority Malay population. This region has been home to a long-standing separatist movement and violent insurgencies. In recent years, peace talks have been on, but now there is fresh talk of self-determination, even an independence referendum. The outgoing government and the military have launched a crackdown. Their critics say they're exaggerating the risks, though. Our next report takes a closer look at this conflict.
Thailand's ruling military establishment is tense. Outgoing Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has alerted the country's National Security Council. He wants them to take action against a group of activists and politicians. Why? For holding a seminar called Self-Determination. What was it about? Separatism, apparently. At least that's what Bangkok fears, the revival of a long-running separatist movement. This is related to a province called Pat Thani. It's located in the southern part of the country. This is a map of Thailand and Malaysia. This is the border between the two countries. You see these three border provinces. They're collectively called the Pat Thani region. And they are the site of a separatist movement. A violent movement which has reportedly claimed over 7,000 lives since 2004. Why? Because despite being Thai provinces, they are home to mostly ethnic Malay people. 88% of the people here follow Islam. This is according to the Thai census of 2014. So, this region is dominated by Malaysian Muslims, but it's now part of the Buddhist kingdom of Thailand. How did that happen? The short answer is the British. Malaysia was part of the British colonial empire. It was called British Malaya. The region bordered the Kingdom of Siam, the predecessor to modern-day Thailand. The British signed a treaty with the kingdom in the year 1909. It's called the Anglo-Siamese or Bangkok Treaty of 1909. In this, the British recognized Siam's control over today's Pat Thani region. Why? Because it's the British. Trade was more important than ensuring a stable border. Money was given priority over culture and traditions, so they drew borders as they deemed fit. The result is this: decades of religious tensions in the Pat Thani region. Bangkok says the provinces are an integral part of Thailand, and they're right. Legally, the borders negotiated with Britain are valid, and any calls for redrawing those borders, any talk of independence, is unlawful. Which brings us back to the activists. They know the laws, so they didn't directly ask for independence. Instead, they asked if a referendum should be held, and if the people of Pat Thani have the right to self-determination. This has raised red flags. The administration is up in arms. They've instituted a crackdown and an investigation. A top military commander called the summit a threat to Thailand's territorial integrity and national security. Ruling party officials want the politicians who attended the summit to be probed. These politicians have now distanced themselves from the event. Any leader who's asked says the same thing. They want to put the insurgency in the region to rest. They want peace through dialogue with separatists. That independence can never be the answer. This is a common story across the world. Britain or any other colonial power causing problems that last generations. Wherever the West had their colonies, instability persists in their wake.
Have you ever been squished into a tight plane seat? Do you curse inadequate leg room on flights or fellow passengers who willfully recline their thrones? Well, if yes, then this story is for you, because we get it. Uncomfortable airplane seats can make even a short journey to paradise feel like forever. But here's some good news. The future of air travel may look very different. I'm talking about economy class bunk beds and double-decker seats. Also increased accessibility for passengers with wheelchairs. Our next report tells you what your seat could look like.
Look at these purple-lit pods with pillows and eye masks awaiting on each bed. They look much more like the bunks you would find on European trains, except with more of a space-age vibe. In fact, these pods look like they belong in a sci-fi movie. But they could soon be front and center in the aisle of the economy section of Air New Zealand. Yes, New Zealand's national carrier is taking good sleep to the skies. Now, decent shut-eye is a privilege on any flight, one that is reserved for those who can afford seats in business or first class. But the lie-flat seats are flat out of reach for most of the passengers, and this is an attempt to change that. It's a concept called Skynest, the first of its kind. It reimagines economy class seating and offers not only bunk beds in the skies, but also a glimmer of hope to its sleep-starved passengers. And this isn't a futuristic concept. It's set to hit the skies in 2024, with each bunk costing about $250 to $380 for every 4 hours. But Purple Pods aren't the only seating innovation that's underway. There are other ways to ride the wind, and a 23-year-old airplane seat designer has a few ideas. His name is Alejandro Nunes Vicente, and he believes that double-decker flying is the future of economy seating. Basically, 2 rows of seats with one on top of the other. This innovation has made a lot of buzz and garnered a mixed response. Would you sit directly below a fellow passenger on a flight? Sounds odd, right? Some say it makes a case for potential claustrophobia. Others say this design will only help companies. They will cram more seats on the plane. But then there are some who are more than willing to try it out, saying that it optimizes space inside the flight. And while the lack of sleep and comfort are 2 major factors ailing flyers, another key issue is poor accessibility. Many times, wheelchairs are damaged in flights. US airlines on average mishandle about 10,500 mobility devices annually. They damage about 1.5 wheelchairs for every 100 flown. A well-known disability activist even died due to this. She developed complications after she rented a wheelchair because her custom wheelchair was destroyed during a United Airlines flight. And this isn't just an American problem. Experts say while data may be lacking, this problem is all-pervasive. But now there may be a solution. A new airplane seat debuted this month. It allows travelers to remain in their own wheelchairs during flights. These wheelchairs would attach to the flight seats, and passengers will be able to use the airplane's headrest and tray tables. This innovation is being called a crucial step forward. It's also economical. Reports say that wheelchair-bound passengers spend over $58 billion on travel annually. Moves like this will make it a win-win for both sides. Moral of the story: air travel is changing. Seating innovation is taking to the skies. And soon enough, we'll know if these ideas fly in the real world.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with the US, tens of thousands of dead fish washed up at beaches in Texas. Officials say low oxygen levels in warm water has led to the situation. Meanwhile, SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket delivered 72 spacecraft to orbit. It has now returned to Earth. And South Korea's capital, Seoul, is marking the 10th anniversary of its famous K-pop band, BTS. Landmarks across Seoul were illuminated in the band's signature color, purple. And finally, what makes this day significant? June the 13th. We're taking you back in history. And this is a rather somber story. On this day in 1997, a fire broke out in a movie theatre in India's capital, Delhi. So you may have heard of the Upahar cinema fire. This happened during the screening of a famous Bollywood film. The theatre had only one functional emergency exit. More than 50 people were killed. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
करता है क्या बुलाते हो क्या